Hello everyone, my name is Raul Perez. I'm a student here studying graphic design at NSU. And today, I just want to give you guys a quick rundown on sculpting in Blender. It will not be a very in-depth video, like I won't be going to every single brush and what it does. But the purpose of this video is mostly just to give you guys a foundational understanding of the workspace, because it can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're not really used to working with these types of programs. So again, just give you like a quick start on what to do, what you're looking at, and just a few things to keep in mind as you're working on your sculpting project here. So to get started, I've just opened up like a generic, like general workspace. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna press A to select everything, and then I'm gonna press X to delete everything here. I want to clear up my space entirely. Then I'm gonna press like 1 to center like the camera on an axis here, and I'm gonna add a reference image. Because when you're like sculpting, it helps a lot, like 99% of the time, to have a reference image in the background if you're trying to achieve something specific. Of course, depending on your project, you might not need one, but in case you do, the process is that you hold down Shift and you press A to bring up this menu, the Add menu. You go into Image to Reference. And then I just have like a sample in here. I'm not gonna like work on it, but just show you guys how it's done. I found the image, so I add it to the scene, and I could work on it how it is now, but like it's like right at the intersection of all of these axes. So I'm going to move it over with this arrow back like a bit, as you see there. Then I'm going to this menu bar over here to the right at data, the very last one. And I'm going to toggle the opacity, and I'm just going to slide it down. Depending, of course, you can change this value to suit your needs, but I'm going to keep it low because I don't want it to distract me too much. Now I want to add like the very first my starting point, my little like base geometry. And for most cases, a sphere would be the best choice for this. So once again, I'm going to press Shift A to the Add menu, and under Mesh, I'm gonna add in a cube. So I have a cube here, but then I'm in this bar here. I'm gonna go to this little like wrench icon for modifiers, and I'm gonna add a modifier. And I'm gonna go under Generate, and what you want is the subdivision surface here. And as you see, it kind of made it into this like low poly spherical object. And that's because it only added like one level here. So this little slider, as you add levels, you can see that it starts to look more and more spherical. So I think a good point here would be like 5, because here you can really see the different like polygons individually. And you go into this little like drop down, and you put apply to make it permanent. I press 1, and I'm pretty much ready to start to move over to the sculpting workspace. Now to move everything over to sculpting, in the top like menu here, I have layout, which is where I'm at, modeling and sculpting. So when I click sculpting, you can see that the workspace has changed entirely. My view is shifted a bit. If I press 1 on the numpad, it's back to like that centered view, and of course the image is behind my object here, because if I didn't move it before, this image would be like in the middle of the sphere, and it might not look or achieve it might make it harder to work on. And so just a quick rundown. If you are familiar with stuff like Photoshop, this might look a bit familiar, but for those who are not, this bar over to the left here is just all of your different tools, which I'm going to be using the brush for the most part. Of course, if you want to explore what the other items do, you could do that, or I can do like a follow-up video to explain what each of these options do. But there's just like paint, mask, draw face sets, and other stuff like that. Which again, you can explore in your own time, but this video just give you guys a quick quick start guide. On the top are like really quick modifiers. Like you can change the size of the brush here, the strength, the texture, the fall off, and other settings here. The bottom is actually with different stuff you can do. Like the default one is draw, but then there's a crease, polish, like scrape, multiplane, blob, and other things you can test out with depending on your project. And to the right are just it's like the same thing as this like properties stuff at the top, but it's way more in depth, where you can really personalize your brush depending on what you're working on. And I will say, just a quick like tips, depending on what you're working on. For example, here on this brush, well, actually, first tip I should give you guys is symmetry. If you're working on like a face model where both sides of the face need to be symmetrical, this little symbol here stands for symmetry with like an X, Y, and Z. So if I press like Y here, and I'm gonna use the draw brush, you can see how I'm like manipulating the surface here, and I'm changing like the typography of it. If I move over, you can see that I did the same thing on the other side. So again, if you're working on like models that are symmetrical, this symmetry like toggle here is like a must-have if you're working on that. But another thing that tip I want to give out is that you see that this basic draw brush, I'm adding or like pulling mass to the surface. If I want to quickly like reverse the direction of the brush to push it in instead of pulling it out, if I hold down the control key as I'm doing it, you can see that now I'm like pushing it in. I reverse the direction of the brush, and that's just a really helpful guide to do that really quick on the fly. And another guide that I could give is that if you hold down Shift on the other hand, it looks kind of similar, but what I'm actually doing is smoothing out the surface. So I'm not really like distorting the geometry of my little sphere here as much. And if you hold down Shift with almost any brush, you automatically start smoothing out the surface. So these three tips can really help you kind of facilitate your workflow when you're working in sculpting, at least to get started with. When you're working on sculpting in Blender, one of the brushes that might be the most useful, for example, might be this one here, which is like the elastic grab. For example, for this head shape, what if I want to try to like pull it to match like this reference image that I have? Again, I'm just doing this roughly just so you guys can see like what I'm doing. So let's just say that I'm making a stylized creature and the head's gonna look like this, for example, right? The sculpting in Blender pretty much is just what you're doing is the model's made out of like a whole bunch of points and like edges, like joints that you're manipulating and pulling around. So if I change like the viewing angle up here to I can see like the mesh, you can see how like here the square is like really tiny and here they're getting like kind of distorted. So as I'm working on the model, I'm just distorting and like really messing up the geometry and the mesh of this sphere. And so later on, when you're trying to do like texture painting or you're trying to animate it and rig it, especially, this could really make like awkward movements or like animations in the future, and you really want to avoid that. And so how to fix this is in here you have a remesh option and drop down. And the default is this 0.1 like meters for the voxel size. And when you hit remesh, you'll see that Blender automatically maintained like the shape of the model, but it calculated the geometry so that it's not as like distorted and broken as it was before. And then of course I can just keep working, I keep pulling, and again I'm gonna distort it again as I'm working on it. For example, I know I'm messing it up, but just for example here. All these little squares are now distorted again. And then as you keep working on it, you have to remember to remesh your model on occasion to maintain like the integrity of all of these like joints and edges. And mostly you want that voxel size to be really small like this when you're like blocking out and making it really rough like shapes. But once you get further on in your sculpting where you want to be really precise with details, you need more polygons in your model, then increasing this voxel size will make your file more dense, but will allow you to get really into like the details and have those details comes out really sharp and clean further on in the process of sculpting. And with that kind of concludes what I have for this video. Again, I know it was really like a shallow overview, but I could make another video, or you guys can just do your own research and explore the different brushes here. Just play around with what each one of them does. Let me change it back to this. To just experiment with it. That's mostly like the thing that I could recommend on, getting to know what sculpting in Blender has to offer. After this video, I hope that I have given you a bit more confidence in how to navigate this space, and just a few of the pitfalls you might run into as you're working on this. I hope that if you decide to do this, that, it goes along smoothly. And with that, that's the end of this video, and I hope you guys have a great day.